It is a really strange phenomenon when you think about rote memorization.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like you learn something as a young kid, maybe it is the Pledge of Allegiance or a nursery rhyme or a classic song, right?
Right, something you just repeat over and over.
Yeah, and you repeat it so many times over the years that the words, well, they detach entirely from their original meaning. You're basically just making sounds with your mouth.
Yeah, the brain just goes on autopilot.
Exactly. I mean,
Mm.
precisely. It feels safe, it feels routine, and, completely harmless.
But then you actually look at the words.
Yes.
Yep.
Then one day, you stop, you look at the words on the page, and you realize the lyrics you have been casually humming are actually a description of a terrifying historical event.
Or a radical call to arms, yeah.
Right. Suddenly, the safe routine thing feels really dangerous. So, welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today, we are taking a stack of intense theological, linguistic, and cultural research and applying that exact phenomenon to arguably the most famous string of words in human history.
The Lord's Prayer.
The Lord's Prayer, yeah. Specifically, we are looking at Matthew 6:10 through 11. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
Such familiar words. Maybe too familiar.
That is the whole point of this deep dive. The mission today is to rescue this familiar prayer from mindless, repetitive recitation. We want to show you how these specific phrases provide a really radical framework for viewing the progression of history, the sovereignty of God, and, well, the literal daily survival of your physical body.
And it is a very necessary rescue mission, I think, because the context in which modern listeners hear and recite these words is, well, it is light years away from the environment where they were first spoken.
Yeah, paint that picture for us.
Well, today you might hear this prayer chanted by a massive choir, in a breathtaking medieval cathedral, or maybe spoken softly by a congregation sitting on padded, climate-controlled church pews.
Sure, very comfortable.
Very. And in that setting, it feels like a beautiful string of religious phrases meant to decorate your private, quiet devotion. But originally, this was not a safe, domestic piece of liturgy.
It was something else entirely.
It was a revolutionary manifesto. Jesus delivered these words to a crowd of calloused, hungry, exhausted day laborers standing on a dusty hillside in first-century Galilee.
And those people were not looking for, like, a spiritual mood boost to start their morning.
No, not at all. They were looking for a way to survive the week.
So to really grasp the shockwave of this prayer, you have to place yourself in the shoes of the people standing on that hillside. You have to understand what they were suffering through at that very moment.
It was a very dark time for them.
Let's unpack the gritty reality of first-century Galilee. Looking at the historical context provided in our sources, it seems like the day-to-day existence for the original audience was defined by a brutal combination of systemic oppression and constant vulnerability.
Yeah, the socio-political environment is absolutely crucial to understanding the text. Galilee was living under the heavy, suffocating thumb of Roman military occupation.
The big guys in charge.
Right. But on a local level, the region was ruled by Herod Antipas. He operated as a client tetrarch for Rome. And Herod was incredibly ambitious. He wanted to leave a massive architectural legacy.
He wanted to be remembered.
Precisely. So he began funding extravagant building projects. He built entire cities like Tiberias and Sepphoris, and these were designed specifically to impress his Roman overlords and display his own grandeur.
But building magnificent cities in the ancient world, I mean, that requires an enormous amount of capital.
Oh, massive amounts. You need stone, mortar, imported materials, and thousands of laborers to do the heavy lifting.
Right.
So Herod had to fund this ambition somehow, and he did it through a relentless, crushing taxation system. He basically squeezed the local agrarian peasantry dry.
And we're not talking about wealthy landowners here, right?
Right.
With surplus capital to spare.
No. These were peasant farmers living on the absolute margins.
That is the real tragedy of the situation, isn't it?
It is. The taxation pushed these families into a vicious cycle of systemic debt. Because the Roman economy was highly monetized, they used coins. But the Galilean peasants operated largely on a barter and subsistence farming system.
They grew what they ate.
Right. So to pay the taxes demanded by Herod's collectors, they would have to take out loans. And to get those loans, they would put up their ancestral family land as collateral.
Land that had been in their families for generations.
Exactly. And when a bad harvest hit and they inevitably defaulted on those loans, the land was seized by wealthy creditors or the state.
Wow.
So you ended up with a massive population of newly landless peasants.
Yeah.
Men who used to own their own small farms were suddenly reduced to working as day laborers on the very land their grandfathers used to own.
That is brutal. Just hoping someone would hire them for a single denarius so they could feed their children that night.
Yes. It created a volatile, angry, and completely disenfranchised populace.
Reading through the sources, it seems obvious that when a society is being crushed like that, radical groups always emerge, right? Groups with a master plan to fix everything.
Oh, always.
The Galileans essentially had three extreme choices for how to handle this crisis. You had the Zealots, the Pharisees, and the Essenes.
And those three factions represent the classic human responses to extreme crisis. First, you had the Zealots. Their solution was bloody, violent military insurrection.
The revolutionary option.
Right. They believed that if they sharpened enough swords, hid in the hill country, and assassinated enough Roman legionnaires and tax collectors, they could bring about God's kingdom by force. They wanted a geopolitical revolution, pure and simple.
Take the country back by the sword.
Yes, very direct. Then you had the Pharisees. They were the religious conservatives of the day. Their solution was rigorous, absolute legalism.
How did that work?
Well, they looked at the Roman occupation and concluded it was a direct punishment from God. They thought Israel had failed to keep the law of Moses perfectly. So their working theory was that if the entire nation could perfectly keep the Sabbath, even for a single day, the Messiah would be summoned from heaven.
Like summoning a superhero.
Pretty much. The Messiah would rescue them and drive out the Romans. So they created thousands of micro-laws, fences around the law, they called them, to ensure no one accidentally broke a commandment. They policed behavior relentlessly.
So that is the moral perfectionism option. Fix the culture by policing behavior to the nth degree, believing that moral purity will trigger a divine rescue.
Spot on. And finally, you had the Essenes. They looked at the corruption of the priesthood in Jerusalem, the brutality of the Roman occupation, and the endless compromises of the Pharisees, and they decided the whole system was just beyond saving.
They just gave up on society.
Completely. Their solution was total isolation. They retreated out into the harsh Judean desert, formed tight-knit, closed monastic communities like the one at Qumran.
Where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found.
Yes, right there. And they just waited for a massive cosmic war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness.
The doomsday prepper option. Abandon society, head to the desert, and wait for the apocalypse.
That sums it up.
But layered on top of all this political and religious tension was the geography itself. Our research details how entirely reliant the Galileans were on seasonal winter rains. It was a strict agrarian economy.
Very strict. They needed the early rains to soften the sun-baked ground for planting, and then they needed the latter rains to swell the grain before the spring harvest.
And the agricultural margins were razor thin.
Oh, incredibly thin. In the ancient world, there was no governmental social safety net. There was no federal disaster relief fund to bail out farmers.
No crop insurance.
None. There was no modern refrigeration or massive centralized grain storage to hedge against a bad yield. A single failed rain cycle meant instantaneous ruin.
So starvation was not a distant theoretical concept they read about.
No, it was a constant anxiety that gnawed at them. If the rain did not fall, or if the tax collector took too much of the yield, they simply would not eat.
Imagine standing on that dusty hillside for a second. Let's really put the listener there. Your stomach is literally growling. Your hands are calloused from working someone else's field. You know a Roman-backed tax collector could show up tomorrow and seize whatever small amount of grain you have left.
It is a terrifying way to live.
In that specific environment, if a rabbi stands up and tells you to pray for a kingdom, you are not thinking of a warm, fuzzy spiritual mood in your heart. You are thinking of a literal, physical rescue operation.
You want the Romans gone.
Right. You want the debt ledgers erased, and you want food in the pantry.
But Jesus does not align with the Zealots, the Pharisees, or the Essenes. He introduces something totally alien.
He bypasses every single humanistic framework they had built. He does not offer a political campaign like the Zealots. He does not give them a list of new behavioral rules like the Pharisees. And he certainly does not call them to hide in a cave like the Essenes.
So what does he give them? He gives them a cosmic philosophy of history packed into a few very specific words of prayer.
This alien concept of the kingdom completely shatters how the ancient world viewed the progression of human history. And honestly, it challenges how you, the listener, might view it today.
Oh, definitely.
We are looking at the phrase, "Thy kingdom come." To really see the force of this, The sources dive into the Greek syntax of Matthew 6.2 co. And this Greek syntax preserves the original Semitic word order.
Which is very important.
Right. In English, we say, thy kingdom come, putting the noun first. But the Greek reads, eltheto hi basileia su. The verb is placed at the absolute front of the sentence.
Yes. And in that linguistic culture, whatever you put at the front of the sentence is the blazing neon sign. It is the engine driving the whole thought.
So the verb comes first.
Right. The verb eltheto translates to let it come. It is an aorist active imperative. It is a decisive, urgent appeal for action. But the critical part of this grammar is that it is asking God to take the action. But putting the verb first, the prayer establishes pure divine initiative.
The sources use a heavy theological term here. They call it monergistic action. Let's unpack that for a second. Mono, meaning one, erg, meaning work, one worker.
That is correct. Monergism means that human beings do not build this kingdom.
We don't build it.
No. You do not bring the kingdom through social engineering or political campaigns or charitable activism or passing better laws. The kingdom is a divine invasion from above. God initiates it, God brings it, and God will consummate it. It relies entirely on his sovereign action, not human effort.
This presents a massive collision with how almost everyone else views history. The sources contrast this biblical worldview with the other dominant ways humanity tries to make sense of time. For example, there is the secular or deistic view of history.
Right. The secular worldview essentially argues that history is meaningless. It envisions a closed system of cause and effect with no author, no overarching narrative, and no destination.
Just stuff happening.
Just stuff happening.
Yeah.
It imagines a cold, material universe that was perhaps wound up like a clock millions of years ago, but is now just slowly winding down to a cold, entropic death.
Our research points to a famous literary monument for this view, actually. Shakespeare's Macbeth.
Oh, that is a great example.
Yeah, when Macbeth realizes his life is falling apart and his ambitions have turned to ash, he delivers that chilling monologue. He calls life a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Signifying nothing. That is the logical conclusion of the secular worldview. History is just random noise going nowhere.
What about the ancient Greek perspective, though? How did they view time?
Well, the ancient Greeks, along with many Eastern philosophies, they viewed history as cyclical. It is an endless, repetitive wheel of reincarnation and historical recurrence.
Like a loop.
Yes. In this view, humanity is trapped on a cosmic hamster wheel of fate. Empires rise, empires fall, people are born, people die, and the whole cycle just repeats itself across infinite eons. You are not moving toward a final goal, you are just going around in a circle, over and over again.
But the prayer, let it come, the kingdom of thee, rejects both of those.
Right.
It rejects the meaningless noise of the secularist and the hamster wheel of the ancient Greeks.
Completely. It forces you into a linear, covenantal, and apocalyptic view of history. History is not wandering aimlessly, and it is not a closed circle. History is an arrow flying straight toward a divinely designated bullseye.
I like that. An arrow.
It has a starting point in the sovereign decree of God, and it has a triumphant ending point, which the biblical authors call the day of the Lord. When you pray, thy kingdom come, you are declaring that history has a destination.
The research introduces a specific theological concept for how this kingdom actually arrives. It calls it inaugurated eschatology, or the idea of the kingdom being already and not yet.
Yes.
I want to make sure we make this crystal clear for the listener. How can a kingdom be both here and coming at the same time? That sounds a bit contradictory.
It is a brilliant paradox, actually. The kingdom is already present because the king has already arrived. In the first coming of Jesus Christ, the kingdom was inaugurated. His life, his teachings, his miracles, his death, and his resurrection were the definitive invasion of God's rule into human history.
He bound the strong man.
Exactly. The kingdom is currently advancing in the world right now through the spread of the gospel and the work of the church, but it is not yet fully consummated.
Because we still have problems.
Huge problems. Believers still suffer physical illness, sin still exists in the world, and creation still groans under the curse. So when the disciple prays, thy kingdom come, they are acknowledging the present reality of Christ's rule while urgently crying out for the physical, literal, final consummation on earth when he returns to make all things new.
Okay, I can hear a natural objection forming for the listener right now. If the kingdom's arrival is monergistic, if it relies entirely on divine action and God's sovereign timetable, doesn't that make human beings passive bystanders?
That is a common question.
Are we just sitting on a bench watching a cosmic play unfold? Why are we commanded to pray for it if God is doing it all anyway?
We often assume that if God is completely sovereign, human responsibility just disappears. But the biblical framework never permits us to separate God's absolute sovereignty from man's real responsibility.
They go hand in hand.
Always. Praying thy kingdom come is an active alignment of your entire being with God's purposes. Furthermore, prayer itself is not a denial of God's providence. It is one of the appointed means of providence.
Oh, that is a great way to put it.
God decrees the end, but he also decrees the means to that end. And the prayers of his people are the actual means he uses to bring about his purposes in history.
So, wanting the kingdom to arrive has immediate, unavoidable implications for the person praying. You cannot genuinely ask for God's kingdom to arrive without wanting the king's rules to govern your life right now.
Right.
I mean, if you ask a monarch to come and take over your city, you are simultaneously agreeing to submit to that monarch's laws. You cannot have the kingdom without the king.
No, you cannot.
This reality brings us face to face with the standard of obedience in the very next phrase, thy will be done.
The focus shifts here to the Greek phrase agethotu telomasu, which translates to let it be done, the will of thee. Just like the previous phrase, the verb is at the front, but this time it is an aorist passive imperative.
Okay, wait. A passive imperative sounds like an oxymoron. How can a command be passive?
It signifies a complete, total yielding of the creation to the active, shaping hand of the Creator. It is a command to submit. But to understand what we are actually submitting to, our sources clarify a massive theological distinction.
And this is rooted deeply in the Westminster Confession.
Yes. It is the distinction between God's decretive will and his preceptive will.
Let's break those two concepts down for the listener, starting with the decretive will. What is that?
God's decretive will is his secret, eternal, sovereign foreordination of everything that happens in the universe. It is his master plan. The decree of God cannot be stopped, frustrated, or altered by anyone.
By anyone at all.
No human rebellion, no political empire, and no demonic force can derail God's decretive will. It is absolute and immutable. Every single event that occurs falls under the umbrella of his sovereign decree.
So if the decretive will is the unstoppable plan, what is the preceptive will?
The preceptive will is God's revealed moral law. It is the commandments, the statutes, and the ethical standards written down in Scripture. It is how God tells human beings they ought to behave.
Okay.
Now here's the crucial difference. While the decretive will can never be broken, the preceptive will is broken by human beings every single day. Every time a person lies, steals, or harbors bitterness, they are violating God's preceptive will.
Hearing you explain the decretive will, it makes me picture a massive, indestructible freight train moving down a set of tracks.
A freight train, okay, yeah.
That train represents the sovereign timeline of history. You cannot stop the train. You cannot derail it. It is going exactly where the conductor planned. But inside the train cars are the passengers, representing us on Earth.
And we're not always well-behaved passengers.
No, not at all. Many of the passengers are running up and down the aisles, vandalizing the seats, screaming at the conductor, and trying to break the windows.
Yeah.
They are in total rebellion. So this prayer, thy will be done, is not asking that the train keeps moving, because the train is going to keep moving no matter what.
Right.
The prayer is asking that the rebellious passengers on board would stop destroying the train cars, sit down, and gladly agree with the conductor's route and the conductor's rules. It is a plea for our moral submission, the preceptive will, to align with his sovereign direction.
That imagery captures the tension between the two wills beautifully. When we pray, thy will be done, we are not offering a fatalistic shrug. We are not saying, well, whatever happens, happens, Sarah.
Which is how a lot of people treat it, honestly.
They do, but fatalism is a pagan concept. This prayer is a holy longing. It is a plea for human beings on earth to obey God's moral law with the exact same joyful, immediate, unquestioning readiness that the angels show in heaven.
The text actually sets the angels as the benchmark, doesn't it? On earth as it is in heaven.
Yes. In heaven, God's will is obeyed perfectly, gladly, immediately, and without any rival desire. There is no hesitation among the angels. There is no debate or pushback. The prayer asks that earthly life, our households, our speech, our financial decisions, our work, would be brought into that heavenly pattern of obedience.
What's so striking about these sources is how they really corner the modern listener. If you actually pray this, the text is demanding that you abandon your own autonomy. It is a complete rejection of our modern follow your heart culture.
Oh, completely.
The anthem of the world right now is, "My will be done." We are taught to look inward, to discover our own subjective truth, and to demand that the world bend to our personal desires. We enthrone our own ambitions and call it authenticity.
We do.
But this text says that your heart is not the king. Your desires are not the ultimate standard of truth.
And this demand for submission corrects two specific errors that run rampant even among religious people. Those are antinomianism and legalism.
Let's define those.
Antinomianism literally means anti-law. It is the idea that because God is gracious, the moral law no longer matters. It treats grace as a license to sin, suggesting you can live however you want because you are forgiven.
Just do whatever.
Right. But you cannot sincerely pray, "Thy will be done," while cherishing secret sin or ignoring God's commands. On the flip side, you have legalism.
Like the Pharisees we talked about?
Precisely. Legalism ignores the actual heart of God's revealed will and invents thousands of man-made rules and traditions to control people, much like the Pharisees did in first-century Galilee. True submission to God's will rejects both the lawlessness of the antinomian and the suffocating control of the legalist. It desires to obey what God has revealed in Scripture, nothing more and nothing less.
If we pause and look at what we have covered so far, we have prayed for the cosmos to bow to the sovereign king. We have prayed for absolute moral submission on earth that mirrors the angels in heaven. We are dealing with the most massive transcendent concepts imaginable.
The highest heights.
Yeah. And then the prayer takes a sudden, shocking nosedive from the highest heavens straight down to a Galilean kitchen table. The Lord moves from the macro governance of the universe directly into the micro provision of our daily lives with the phrase, "Give us this day our daily bread."
It is a breathtaking shift in scale, and it introduces a massive linguistic puzzle.
Oh, right, the Greek word.
The Greek word translated as daily in our English Bibles is epiousios. This word is what linguists call a hapax legomenon.
Okay, the research uses this phrase, hapax legomenon, which I understand essentially means a linguistic ghost, right? A word that only appears once in the entire written record. It seems incredible that a word in the most famous prayer in history is a total outlier.
It is an absolute anomaly. Outside of this prayer in Matthew and the parallel account in Luke 11, the word epiousios appears nowhere else in the entire corpus of ancient Greek literature. Completely absent. It is not in classical Greek writings, not in secular documents, not in philosophical texts. Origen, who was an early church father and an absolute master of the Greek language, he actually concluded that the gospel writers must have coined the word themselves.
They just made it up.
Well, made it up to capture a very specific, complex Semitic concept that simply did not have a direct Greek equivalent.
If the word does not exist anywhere else, how did the early church know how to translate it? The sources outline a fascinating historical debate over this one word. Walk us through the different theories the early church fathers had as they tried to crack the code of epiousios.
The debate was intense, to say the least, and the proposed solutions generally fell into two categories: quantitative and chronological. On the quantitative side, you had fathers like Origen and John Chrysostom. They argued that epiousios meant the bread of subsistence.
Which sounds pretty bleak.
It was a somewhat harsh ascetic view. It meant you were praying for the absolute bare minimum amount of calories required to keep your physical body alive for another 24 hours. Nothing more.
Just enough to not starve to death today.
Exactly.
What was the chronological view then?
Cyril of Jerusalem argued for a chronological meaning, translating it simply as bread for today. It focused entirely on immediate present provision. But then you had Jerome.
Jerome.
A brilliant scholar and translator who produced the Latin Vulgate. He argued that it meant bread for tomorrow. He based this on a discovery he made in a lost document called the Aramaic Gospel of the Hebrews, which used the Hebrew word mehar, meaning tomorrow.
Praying for tomorrow's bread today.
Whoa.
But the research mentions that Jerome attached a heavy theological meaning to this bread of tomorrow, didn't he?
He did. Jerome and others who followed this line of thought viewed the bread of tomorrow not just as literal food for the next day, but as an eschatological concept.
Looking to the end of time.
Right. They saw it as praying forward to the great messianic banquet at the end of history. They believed the prayer was asking for a foretaste of the future kingdom feast in the present moment. So you had these competing ideas floating around the early church. Bare subsistence, bread for today, and the eschatological bread of tomorrow.
It sounds like a linguistic logjam. How did we get a breakthrough on what this actually means for the believer praying it today?
The breakthrough comes from looking beyond Greek and returning to the cultural and linguistic roots of the original audience. Our sources highlight the work of Kenneth Bailey, a scholar of Middle Eastern culture, and his examination of the Old Syriac translation of the Gospels.
Syriac being related to Aramaic.
Yes, Syriac is a dialect of Aramaic, which was the native language spoken by Jesus and his disciples in Galilee. The Old Syriac translation dates back to the 2nd century, making it the oldest surviving translation of the New Testament. It gives us a window into how the very earliest Aramaic-speaking Christians understood Christ's words. In the Old Syriac, the phrase used for daily bread is lamo ameno.
Let's break that down. Lamo means bread. What does meno mean?
Ameno shares a root with a word we all know very well, amen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The root meaning carries the idea of certainty, faithfulness, endurance, and perpetuity. So when you translate lamo ameno back into English, the oldest historical understanding of this petition is a prayer for perpetual, never-ceasing bread.
Wait, I don't get a magical never-ending loaf of sourdough sitting on my kitchen counter when I pray this. What does never-ceasing actually mean for a day laborer in first-century Galilee who might literally run out of grain by Thursday?
It is not a promise of a magical object. It is a promise of an unshakable relationship with the provider. To pray for perpetual, never-ceasing bread is to ask for a constant, faithful stream of provision that meets the need exactly when the need arises.
Oh, that makes sense.
It beautifully gathers all the early church theories together. It is bread for today, it secures tomorrow, it sustains life, and it points to the ultimate satisfaction in the kingdom. It is about resting entirely in the certainty of God's covenantal faithfulness.
It makes me think of a pipeline. Imagine you are standing in a scorching desert, and all you have in your hand is a tiny cup of water.
Not much water.
Right. If that cup is all there is, you are going to panic. You are going to guard it with your life.
Yeah.
But if that cup is attached to a pipe, and you know that pipe is connected to an infinite, massive reservoir up in the mountains, your anxiety vanishes.
Because the source is endless.
Exactly. You might only have one cup's worth of water in front of you right now, but you know the supply is never ceasing. The reservoir will not run dry. That is the difference between hoarding your own resources in a panic and trusting the Father's provision.
Yes, and to take that pipeline analogy further, understanding this unshakable supply fundamentally strikes at the heart of our modern economic anxieties. Jesus commands us to pray this way to sever the root of merimna, the Greek word for paralyzing existential worry.
We all struggle with that.
We do. The pagan world runs frantically after food, clothing, and security because they believe they are entirely on their own in a closed universe. But the disciple is called to rest in the perpetual care of a Father who knows what they need before they even ask.
The sources also point out a stark linguistic choice Jesus makes here that completely undercuts consumerism. He uses the word artos for bread.
Artos is the common, everyday word for a standard loaf of bread. In this context, it functions as a synecdoche.
A synecdoche, right. A figure of speech where a part represents the whole.
Yes. It stands for the basic, ordinary necessities required to sustain physical life. Food, shelter, clothing. But what is striking is what Jesus does not say. The Greek language had other words he could have used. He could have used tryphair, which means luxury, indulgence, or soft living. He could have used hypocritical, which refers to sensual pleasure and excess.
But he didn't. By choosing artos, Jesus strictly limits the request to the basics.
He excludes luxury, hoarded wealth, and self-indulgence from the prayer entirely. This is a direct, devastating strike against the modern prosperity gospel, which teaches people to treat God like a cosmic slot machine for acquiring wealth and opulence.
Put a coin in, get a blessing out.
Exactly, and it is entirely unbiblical. It also rebukes the general consumer greed of Western culture. We are trained by advertising to constantly confuse our endless wants with our actual needs. We measure God's love by our level of comfort and excess. But Christ teaches us to ask for sufficient sustenance, to be content with it, and to receive it with deep gratitude as an unmerited gift from the Creator.
We are praying for this perpetual basic provision to sustain our lives. But this bread is not a private stash. The grammar of the prayer will not allow you to take your bread and hide in a corner. It all comes down to the pronouns.
The pronouns change everything.
Jesus does not instruct the disciple to pray, "My Father in heaven, give me today my daily bread." He uses the corporate plural, "Our Father, and give us this day our daily bread."
That shift from singular to plural completely obliterates individualistic religion. In a culture dominated by radical individualism, where we view faith as a purely private transaction between me and God, the word our is a severe rebuke.
It connects you to everyone else.
Yes. When you pray, our bread, you are legally and spiritually binding your personal physical survival to the physical welfare of the person sitting next to you. You are acknowledging that you are part of a covenant community, a family.
The sources provide a really striking illustration of this from Kenneth Bailey's research involving Mother Teresa in Calcutta.
It is a convicting historical account. Mother Teresa was working among the poorest of the poor in Calcutta. She encountered a Hindu mother of 8 children who had absolutely nothing and was starving. Someone managed to give this mother a tiny portion of rice, barely enough to sustain her own family for a single meal.
Really anything.
But immediately upon receiving it, the mother divided the small pile of rice in half. She kept one half for her own children, and she took the other half to her Muslim neighbors next door, because she knew they were starving too.
In the midst of her own physical agony and the starvation of her children, she still saw the neighbor. She intuitively understood the theology of our bread. She recognized that even though the rice was in her hands, it belonged to her neighbors just as much as it belonged to her.
That is the ethic of the kingdom in action. It serves as a massive indictment of modern economic individualism and greed. Think about the implications of this in the first century context, or even today.
Yeah, let's think about that.
If a wealthy landowner goes to the synagogue or the church and he prays, "Give us this day our daily bread," while knowing full well that his tenant farmer or his employee is struggling to feed their family, that prayer is an act of hypocrisy.
You cannot sincerely ask God to provide for the community while you are actively hoarding the community's resources.
No, you can't. The prayer is designed to form a radically countercultural community of mutual care. It demands that the church function as an outpost of heaven on earth, where resources are shared, burdens are carried, and no one is left to face the terror of starvation alone.
And that is how the anxiety goes away.
Yes. This shared covenantal provision is the practical mechanism that cuts through the anxiety we discussed earlier. You are free from panic, not just because God is in heaven, but because God has placed you in a family of believers who are committed to making sure our bread is distributed justly.
It is a stunning vision of human solidarity. But the sources do not leave this prayer at the level of social ethics or communal sharing. They bring the entire analysis to a focal point in the person of Jesus Christ himself. How does Christ fulfill these specific petitions?
Every single syllable of this prayer points directly to the person and the redemptive work of Christ. He is the fulfillment of it all. We discussed earlier how the kingdom is a divine invasion from above. The ancient church father Origen used a magnificent term to describe Jesus, autobasileia. It translates to the kingdom in person. Jesus is not just a messenger pointing to a future kingdom. He is the physical embodiment of God's reign on earth. Where the king is, there is the kingdom. Furthermore, he is the only human being who has ever perfectly fulfilled the petition, "Thy will be done."
Because every son of Adam and daughter of Eve has rebelled against God's preceptive will, we all fail that standard constantly.
We do, every single day. But Jesus lived a life of absolute, flawless, active obedience to the Father's will. The climax of this obedience is seen in the Garden of Gethsemane.
On the night before his crucifixion.
Right. Facing the incomprehensible agony of bearing the wrath of God for sin, Jesus falls to the ground and prays, "Not as I will, but as you will." He modeled the exact submission he taught his disciples. He yielded completely to the decretive will of the Father to secure our salvation.
And what about the bread? How does Christ fulfill the petition for physical sustenance?
He fulfills it by demonstrating that he is the source of eternal sustenance. The text points out that in John chapter 6, Jesus explicitly declares, "I am the bread of life."
I am the bread.
In Greek, that is ho artos to Zeus. He contrasts himself with the literal manna that the Israelites ate in the wilderness. That physical bread kept them alive for a day, but eventually they all died. Physical bread only delays the inevitable.
It just keeps you going for another 24 hours.
But Christ is the true, perpetual bread that comes down from heaven. His substitutionary death on the cross, his broken body provides the eternal bread of justification. When a believer feeds on Christ by faith, their deepest existential starvation is satisfied forever. He is the true lamo ameno, the never-ceasing provision for our souls.
If we pull all of this together, we see a breathtaking picture of God's character. The same sovereign God who decrees the end of cosmic history, who holds the timeline of the universe in his hands, is the exact same God who meticulously measures out the flour for your breakfast tomorrow morning.
The macro and the micro.
Yeah. He is not just the God of the macro, ruling galaxies and empires. He is the God of the micro, intimately involved in the biological necessities of your daily life. Taking a hard look at Matthew 6:10 and 11 exposes the functional atheism of modern life. We might claim to believe in God, but we often live, plan, and worry as if we are entirely in charge of our own destiny.
We really do.
This text asks the listener to step down from self-rule and submit to the King's preceptive will. It also provides a way to relieve our constant anxiety. By casting your physical preservation upon the unshakable providence of God, you are freed from the secular panic of accumulating wealth. You do not have to stockpile your own security because you have a Father who knows what you need, which frees you to be radically generous toward your neighbor.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over on your own as you go about the rest of your day.
Let's hear it.
We have seen how this prayer perfectly links the highest, holiest decrees of heaven with the literal biological digestion of a piece of bread. If that is true, then the modern concept of a secular life, a life divided into spiritual moments and ordinary, meaningless tasks, is a complete myth.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't. What if every time you sit down at a table and chew your food, you are not just fueling your body, but you are participating in a theological event? How would realizing that the creator of the universe is intimately involved in your biology change the way you treat your physical body tomorrow morning? The next time you recite the Lord's Prayer, remember, you are not just saying words. You are asking for the world to be turned upside down, starting with your own heart and ending with the bread on your plate.